Good morning and welcome. This is 10 Years Hence. My name is Jim O'Rourke. I'm a professor of management and director of the Fanning Center for Business Communication here in the Mendoza College of Business. Welcome. I'll be your instructor and host for this lecture series. We have arranged a series of 7 lectures for you that I think you'll find interesting and exciting. Our aim is to engage in a little structured speculation about the future, specifically the decade just ahead and the world we're likely to inhabit 10 years from now. We'll do that from a number of perspectives, but all of it will be focused on one central theme, the future of work. Our speakers come to us from many parts of the nation and all walks of life. Dr. Karie Willyerd is a workplace futurist for SuccessFactors, a division of SAP. Viv Goldstein is Director of Innovation Acceleration at General Electric. Elizabeth Heller Allen is Senior Vice President for External Affairs for the Metro Health System of Cleveland, Ohio. Dusty Tucker Jenkins is Senior Vice President for Communication at Target Corporation. Richard Marshall is Global Managing Director for Corporate Affairs Center at Korn Ferry in New York. George Logothetis is Chairman and CEO of Libra Group, a global shipping, aviation, and real estate conglomerate. And Bill Chamberlain is Principal Analyst for IBM Corporate Market Research. They'll be with us throughout the semester. We'll gather here on 7 separate Friday mornings during the spring semester, beginning, we hope, promptly at 10:40 each day, concluding about noon. In order to make this a productive, useful experience for all, I have just a few requests of you. First, please plan to arrive here on scheduled lecture dates before 10:40 a.m. 10:40 p.m. would help as well. We'll begin I think at 10:40, and I'd like you to be in your seats by then, ready to listen. Second, if you don't yet have one, please pick up a copy of the syllabus at the 2 entrance points. If you're enrolled for the course, I've also sent you a PDF version of that document. Third, please give our guest lecturers your full attention and complete courtesy. This means, of course, my preference for you to be fully awake and engaged in the process. No trips outside the lecture hall, barring a genuine emergency of some sort. Fourth, please turn off your laptops, iPods, iPads, and cell phones. Please close your laptops. This would be the moment to do that. Thank you. Appreciate your picking up on that cue. Fifth, if you are enrolled in this course for credit, you will be required to attend all lectures. I will handle exceptions to this rule personally. There are no unexcused absences. Even if an absence is justified, excused, and documented, you will need to make up the work by viewing and summarizing the lecture you've missed or another lecture on campus. See me for details. If you're enrolled in this course for credit, you will receive a color-coded stamped attendance card at the beginning of each lecture. Please print your name on that card along with the last 4 digits of your student number. At the conclusion of each lecture, we will place receptacles for those cards at each of the entrances on both the first and second floor. Please deposit your card as you leave. If you do not deposit your attendance card for all 7 lectures, that will complicate the process of giving you credit for the course. When our speaker concludes her remarks today, we'll offer you an opportunity to participate by asking questions. We'll have wireless microphones available, and we will ask that you wait for the attendant to pass one to you. It's not simply so that you can be heard in the room. We're also recording the lecture, and this will be posted to the college server. A number of people tell us that they come to the server by Wednesday following the lecture to see what the speaker has had to say. Surprisingly, a number of parents have logged in and watched those lectures, so it's important that we capture your question on the microphone as well. Thank you. Let's begin the series now with our first session. Dr. Karie Willyerd is a workplace futurist at SuccessFactors, an SAP human capital software company. Prior to that, she was the co-founder and CEO of Jambock, the industry's first video-based informal social learning software platform, which was acquired by SuccessFactors in March of 2011. Jambock is now incorporated into the SAP Jam product offering. Karie was formerly Chief Learning Officer at Sun Microsystems. Dr. Willyerd is co-author of the award-winning bestseller, The 2020 Workplace: How Innovative Companies Attract, Develop, and Keep Tomorrow's Employees Today, from Harper Business. She's a regular blogger for Harvard Business Review, co-authored a feature article on mentoring millennials in HBR, and has written dozens of other articles for publication. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Karie Willyerd.
Hello. First off, I'll do a sound check. Can you hear me in the back okay? All the way back up there? Okay, awesome. Can I get a sense, how many of you are graduate students? Okay, big part of you. So, and how many of you have worked full-time in a job before coming here? Okay, awesome. So I'm gonna pick one topic that I'm gonna talk to today, and that's about my newest book, which is, we've got some cards available for you, and you can, on the back, it's got how to download a free first chapter. It is an Amazon Book of the Month in business and leadership, so you get your free first chapter by picking up a card up here. But at the end, when we have questions, if you want to kind of double think about some things along the way, I'm happy to talk not only about the topics that we'll be discussing today, but I have the experience of being a corporate geek and working for 5 different CEOs across the United States in global companies. And I've also done a startup and taken everything down to, starting with only 11 people, how do you create a company and sell it? So if that's what your passion is, we can also save room at the end for that topic. So it doesn't have to be just this topic. So, but this one interests me a lot. Yesterday I was talking to someone, a young man. He was young compared to me, so he was in his 30s. And he said, I had my sell-by date moment not too long ago. He was the assistant pastor for a church and directed their singing programs. And he said, I had to go meet some others in the community who were also music directors at churches. And I went to the restaurant and I realized, I don't know any of them, so I wonder what they look like. And he thought, well, I'll just look for people who look like musicians. So he goes around the corner and he sees, some long-haired, probably going to be musicians. And he thought, okay, that's my group. And then he thought, wait a minute, I'm 10 years older than anyone in that group. And he realized that he was going to be on this path that took him for as long as he would stay in that path. And it wasn't going to go up and it wasn't going to go sideways. He was doing work he loved, but he was in this same path. And that's what we're really going to talk about today, is how do you make sure in a time of so much change, and we'll kind of talk about what that change is, that you are continuously moving and changing to keep up with the times. So let's start with some of the things that we'll go over today. We did extensive research, including starting with one of these questions. So what concerns you most about your future? If you could pick one of these on here. Concerned about wage stagnation or economic uncertainty or not enough opportunities for advancement. If this makes sense to you, if you've been in a role, to think about when you were there. Your position changing or becoming obsolete, or insufficient staffing levels. How many say A? Raise your hand. Okay, no one. B, economic uncertainty. Makes sense if you're getting ready to go out there. Not enough opportunity for advancement. C. And then D, position changing or becoming obsolete. And finally, inadequate staffing levels. Got it. Okay, so kind of like focused between a little bit on B, and then if you didn't turn your head around, lots of C's and D's. Maybe a few more C's than D's. Well, when we did this in 27 countries, and 5,500 different people. The number one answer was economic uncertainty or becoming obsolete. And number two was not enough opportunities for advancement, which really kind of go together in some ways because they're about career movement. Our study done with Oxford Economics and SAP was 27 countries, twin studies, executives and employees, asking many of the same questions about where are we going in the future, what are you hoping for the future, and then we did 100 interviews with executives as well. I did my doctoral work at Case Western Reserve, and my co-author was also at Case Western Reserve at the same time. And so we reviewed over 1,000 papers looking at the question, how do people stay up to date? What can they do to learn further? And talked to several dozen chief learning officers, like I had been, around what are the practices that you see people use every day to try and stay up to date. But first, let's talk about, well, why do you have to stay up to date? Isn't the world just kind of like the same as it always has been, or is the future of work shifting? So let's talk about just a few trends about how the future of work is shifting. First off, there's globalization. And McKinsey estimates that 50% of the largest companies in the world are going to be coming from what we now consider developing countries. So whereas it used to be that 90% or more were from the already developed countries, now the shift in employment, the shift in size, the shift in revenue is moving to developing countries. Here I am in Indiana, which is my home state, by the way, or where I was born, and I work, my office is in San Francisco. I live in Colorado for a German company. I mean, we have such a diverse set of experiences now in terms of what does it mean to work globally. And I think climate change is going to affect that. The purpose of this conversation is not about what's causing it or whatever, just that it is, and that it's causing people to think about their location strategies for their businesses, which are going to affect jobs then. These demographic shifts are really interesting. If you look at the International Census Bureau data, you'll see that there are a lot of baby boomers, and there's not a lot of Gen X, and there's a lot of millennials. Baby boomers are now turning 65 at the rate of 11,000 a day in the United States. That's a lot of people who are making shifts in how they think about work. Many of them are deciding to continue working, but not necessarily in the same job. So that's opening up a lot of jobs. And behind them, there's not enough Gen X to fill the jobs. So I think it's this great opportunity for the millennials in the room, or for the Gen X in the room, to be able to move into leadership positions very early, earlier than we've seen in over 20 years, because we've just got such a vacuum going out the back door. And that's not the only demographic shift. 1 in 2 babies born in the US is non-Caucasian now. So we're going to have a very diverse workforce. So people are going to have to be comfortable with that diversity at work. And there's a few others on here that I won't spend as much time on. Obviously, this explosion of data, there's now more data bits than there are stars in the universe. There's an enormous amount of emerging technologies. I'm going to show you just a couple here. And then one of the things that I think people are looking for is, how can you help me take all this complexity and make it simple? And that's one of the things that will create a really big market hole for people who can help do that. So the question is then, could you become obsolete? Is the work that you're doing, the things that you're doing, possibly could be replaced? Could a robot replace your job? Does a robot want your job, essentially? Can anybody think of a position or a job that you think might be replaced by a robot? Anybody have an idea? Yeah.
World Economic Forum said last week
Yep.
that artificial intelligence is going to conduct probably 40% of all external audits in publicly traded companies by 2025.
Was anybody planning on being an auditor? Uh-oh, there's a whole bunch of hands that just went up. I do have some tips for you.
This may be the same group that predicted flying cars, so
Yeah.
you never know.
Yes, but their work is predicated on, that analysis is predicated on 2 other studies, one of which I'm going to cover here. So here's a hotel that opened up in July. You walk up to the front desk, and who greets you? You get your pick of an actroid, so an amazingly expressive robot. Or if you're kind of freaked out by a woman in a robotic body, then you can pick the little raptor and check in through the raptor. So it turns out kids and women really love the raptor for check-in, and the guys are going to see the actroid. The entire hotel has been roboticized. So your room delivery of your food comes through on a red trolley, and the trolley just kind of finds its way to you. Practically every position that is customer facing is robotic. There are humans in the background. There are humans that are still cleaning the rooms. They haven't gotten that part done, but they're increasingly looking to. And when you think about it, Japan is not replacing its population, and its population is aging. So it's estimated that in 10 years, over 25% of the population will be 85 or older. So how do you get people to take care of those 85-year-olds if you're not bringing in immigrants and so on? And so you see big announcements like IBM going in to work with the government of Japan to look at how do we do things like arrange for elder care, in hospitals with robots. That's just an easy example. We'll discuss more. One typical one that every single person here has probably interacted with is the pharmacist. So it's not just high-end jobs or low-end jobs. It's kind of jobs all over the place. When you think about it, a pharmacist is essentially, if you can define a job by a set of algorithms, a computer can replace it in whatever form. So I'm going to put up here 2, can you read these? Is everybody able to read it? Here's 2 articles. One was written by a robot. One was written by me. I used to be a newspaper reporter at my first career. So which one, read it for just a second and tell me which one you think was written by a robot. All right, how many people say a robot wrote A? And how many people say a robot wrote B? Okay, we're leaning towards A, and A is the right answer. So a company called Narrative Science, and all it takes is data feeds, and the robot, and I'm calling a robot any computerization that includes algorithms behind it. A robot wrote A. Robots are estimated to be able to write nearly 90% of the news by 2030. So a lot of the news you're already reading is being written in the background, and then an editor is just kind of going over it. The same thing with quarterly reports for financial news. And so people who used to be employed to look at that and do that kind of work are now being replaced by an algorithm and maybe just one person who kind of oversees and polishes it up for a graphics effect. And the World Economics Forum was saying nearly 5 million jobs, they estimate, will be replaced over the next decade because of what we can get from machine learning, because the machine learning is just working exponentially faster than humans are. So that includes things like medical diagnosis. Legal research, a lot of legal research is already done via computer. Financial advice, auditing, as you suggested earlier. So somewhere along the way, we need to figure out how to reinvent the business model of you. And we think that the answer to that is to stretch today. I see I might be missing one slide. One study was done by Oxford University, and they took and looked at 702 out of the 750 jobs that are written up in the Bureau of Labor Statistics at the jobs that are available. So they read the job descriptions, and then in their study, what they decided was how much of the work that is described in each of these jobs could be mechanized or automated within the next decade, knowing where technology is going. And they decided that 47% of jobs are highly susceptible, and another 19% are of medium susceptibility to being replaced by computerization. Now, John Kennedy said that he trusted that if technology replaces jobs, people are smart enough to create new jobs. And I actually believe that as well. But I think it's going to mean a shift for everyone to think, in many ways, you're going to have to learn how to make the robot your best friend. And how do you work with computerization? How do you build the digital skills that you need for tomorrow? So when we decided we wanted to write a book, my co-author and I, about this topic of how do you extend your sell-by date? If everybody's kind of got a looming sell-by date because of all of the changes that are happening, what can you do? And first off, we found that people told us they had kind of three imperatives for us to be thinking about. One, it's all on you. I was at a conference in Chicago, and up on the front of the stage with a room maybe 4 times this size, full of chief human resources officers. And over here on the podium, the man says, "I'm not responsible for anyone's development except my own." And you could kind of hear the audience go, say, "What?" And then all of a sudden they start clapping. And I realized at that moment that even companies no longer feel like they owe to you to help you figure out your career. It really is all on you for your career development. And so one of the things we wanted to do then is give people the tools to really think about that, because there's just very few companies left that have a career plan. The career plan has to be in your head. And hopefully the company has got some things to help you move ahead and has some forward-thinking ideas on how to help you do that. But for the most part, it's all on you. And at different points in your life, you're going to have a chance to be able to really dig in and work on your career, and at other times, maybe not. So you need options. And everyone we talk to wants to be further along in the future than they are now. They want progress. You wouldn't be in this room if you didn't want progress in your career, if you didn't have the hopes and dreams about what you can become and what it will take for you to be the best self that you can be at work. So here's the 5 practices that we came up with, and I'm going to dig into each one of these just a little bit and give you, altogether we came up with about 30 strategies for people to use. So I'm just going to give you a handful from each of the practices. But the first practice is learn on the fly. So you're sitting in a formal setting now and learning, so good on you. And I used to be a chief talent officer for a very large company, meaning I was in charge of recruiting and development and so on. And I tell you, not a resume came through where somebody didn't say, "I'm a good learner. I'm a fast learner. I'm a quick learner." And my question is, how do you know? How do you know that you're a good learner on the job? Just because you did well in school is not an indication. In fact, there's no relationship, actually, between how you do in school and how well you perform at work. You have to synthesize what you learned in school to be able to go do great things at work. It's just like saying, "I'm a great breather." Probably everybody in the room thinks they know how to breathe well. but you can actually get better at breathing. There are techniques, all you have to do is go to a yoga class and find out you know really nothing about breathing and all the different ways that you can breathe for stress relief or for relaxation or for dealing with pain. There are lots of different ways to breathe. So what we've come up with are different ways for people to think about how to learn on the fly. The second one is be open, because opportunities can pass you by, and I'm going to tell you a story about a founder of Apple. The third is build a diverse network, because the number one way people told us they stayed current was to hang around smart people. It's really hard to keep up with things yourself. So if you hang around other smart people, that can help you stay current and up to date. And then a little bit of a controversial statement here by using the word greedy, because that's almost never used positively in the English language. But be greedy about experiences, because you don't want to be the person who year after year after year is getting the same experience and not moving forward. And then finally, how do you deal with setbacks? Because everybody has them. And so how can you move forward, bounce forward? So let's talk one tip from learning on the fly. And learning on the fly is just maximizing your opportunity to learn outside the classroom. There's a maxim that people in learning and training use that is 70% of learning happens on the job, 20% from your boss and mentors, and 10% in the classroom. So how can you take advantage of that 70% that is on the job? So this one is one that I'm grateful to the Learning Innovation Lab at Harvard for some work they've done at looking at how can you improve learning on the job. Let's think about the 5 to 7 different projects or goals that you might have had when you were working full-time, or that you can imagine you might have in your future job. Well, it turns out that people can approach it with different stances, or think of it as a mindset. Some people get a long list of things and they like to check them off and get them done, and then take pride in being very efficient and productive. So have a long list of tasks and just get them all done and be one of the most productive people around. So the good news is you're productive and you're efficient. The bad news is you don't leave yourself a lot of room for learning because you're focused on completion. A second stance might be performance. I really want to do this well because my boss is expecting it, or it's an important client. And so just by having that mindset, I want to do it well, you start to think about, well, what does good look like? So you start to compare yourself to other projects. You might do a little extra work in terms of finding out what good looks like in order to get it done. And the third approach or stance might be called development. And that is, wow, this is a breakthrough project for me. If I do this well, it might promote my career. I really want to make sure I learn enough about this while I get the chance to do this project. And that might include going and talking to an expert. In one study, software engineers who went and talked to an expert for 15 minutes improved their productivity by 25%. So, maybe taking an online course, maybe taking a course, maybe whatever it might be, you learn more when you take a development approach. So here's the tip. Make sure you don't fall into a pattern of doing everything that you do in the same way, whether it's completion, performance, or development. You have to have a mix. So be conscious about your work and decide, I'm going to move these things into a category of just get them done. And even though I have always been a person who liked to do everything well, just put some in that just get it done mode so you have time for the development mode. So that's tip number 1 for learning on the job. Does that make sense? And another really important, if other than Stretch, if there's any book I would recommend you read, it's Mindset by Dweck. It's one of the most phenomenal books out there. My co-author is president of a college, and she had a student who came up to her and said, I listened to Dweck's TED Talk, and I was getting ready to go over and drop out of school because I thought I just don't have what it takes. She says, now I realize that it's not a matter of do you have what it takes, it's a matter of whether you're willing to work and continue, because everyone has what it takes. It's just a matter of whether it may not be now, right away. It'll take some work to get there. So Carol Dweck describes two mindsets. A fixed mindset, where you kind of believe you're born with the talents you have, and you can move off of those a little bit, or people who believe you can't begin to know what the talent of someone might be through work and toil and patience. So here's some questions to find out what your mindset is. So if you've got a pencil and paper, let's go through the first question here, which is, on a scale of 1 to 7, are you willing to select a challenging work assignment that you can learn from? Or do you prefer, on the other end, low end of the scale would be, I really like to get assignments that I know I can do well on. I often look for opportunities to develop new skills and knowledge, 1 to 7. Do you enjoy challenging and difficult tasks at work? Is your development so important to you that you would take some risks? In other words, if you want the risk of maybe looking bad or creating a problem for the team. Do you like to work in environments that have a high level of ability and talent? So if you have an average, if you take these and get an average score, and your score is over 6, you've probably got a good learning orientation. But if not, maybe you should be thinking about, am I taking enough risks in terms of going out and learning? Here's what Carol Dweck says, that a growth mindset believes that the potential of really anybody is unknown and unknowable, because it's impossible to foresee what can be accomplished with years of passion, toil, and training. Because I worked in HR and in talent for a while, we used to do talent reviews that looked at who are the people that are high potential. And you kind of thought of that as a fixed place. So if you go out as managers and you're looking at talent for people, just one takeaway from this, if you can just remember, watch out for the people that really are committed to growing and learning, because at any moment in time, someone else might look like they're high potential, but watch someone's trajectory over time. Don't get sucked into the, let's look at it once at this point in the year, once at this point in the year, once at this point in the year. But just look to see who's really got the commitment to continue to learn. So practice 2, be open. And this is recognizing opportunities when they're around. Okay, I heard that we weren't gonna have any phones open, so don't look this up real quickly. Does anybody know who Ron Wayne is? Okay, so Ron Wayne worked for a game development company. And he had 2 friends, one who also worked at this gaming company, who had an idea for a startup. And Ron was head of strategy and was the older of the 3 friends. And they got a little success right off the bat in this sideline startup company. And it came to the point where the other 2 decided that they were gonna quit their jobs, and they wanted Ron to quit his job as well. And he said, well, I might quit my job sometime, but the CEO really needs me on this strategy project right now. So after some thought, he decided to not give up his job. And they bought him out for $15,000. And then they got funding. The project continued. He created the first logo for the company. He created the first tech manual for the company. The partners got some additional funding, and they said, one more shot, Ron. You've finished that project at work. We'd really like you to come to work with us. And he said, I just don't think I will. I don't want to take the chance. I'm really happy where I am. Now, not all of us are going to face this same dilemma, but Ron Wayne is the 3rd partner and 10% owner of Apple Computer, which he sold out for $15,000. Of course, he'd be one of the wealthiest people in the world now, and you can go read his story on Facebook. He keeps a Facebook page, and he talks about it, and he's very open about it, and he says, if I'd known what it was going to do, but when you read his Facebook pages, at least the way I interpret reading them, I feel like he had made up his mind on something and he was going to progress according to that plan. And instead, I think we have to constantly be looking. Your opportunity may not be Apple Computer, and it doesn't mean that you should quit your job for every startup that comes along, because 85% of them are going to fail. But is there an opportunity that it doesn't seem obvious, and can you consider those opportunities and not be in the Ron Wayne shoes? So here's a story of Chris James, who I know. Chris, he worked at, I don't think it matters in here because he's given me permission. So he actually worked for me. When I went into Sun, he worked a level down from me, and he was a senior director. So he was very frustrated because he'd been passed over for BP. A new person had come in for him to report to, and then I'd come in as a senior VP. And he felt like he was training everybody how to do the job. He ran the global certification business for Java. And he just was very frustrated that 4 times in a row he had been turned down for a job. He'd been a senior director for 6 years. So some people could take a fixed mindset. In fact, at that point he did. He said, I guess I'm not cut out to be a VP. I guess that's not who I am. So some people can just kind of get stuck at that level. Well, I thought Chris had some really good skills, and I could see what was holding him back. So I made a bargain with him. I said, Chris, I'll promote you to work directly on my staff, and I'm going to give you a lot of feedback to see if we can't move you along the way. And he said, all right, he bought the deal. You can't tell maybe from the picture, except he does look a little bit like the butler on Downton Abbey, but he's Welsh. And he's got a really dry sense of humor. And he's very wicked smart. So what he would do when somebody's making a presentation on ideas or whatever is he could think about right away why it wouldn't work. You've probably met people like this. Right off the bat, they're telling you what's wrong with your idea, not necessarily because they're trying to be obstructionist, but because they want to help solve to what could get in the way of it. Well, that's what Chris was doing. After 6 months, Chris told me he'd had more feedback from me than he'd had in all of his life combined, including from his wife. So, but the good news is that within another year, Chris was a VP. And then within another year after that, he was an SVP. With 2 years after that, he was the COO of a software company. And today, he's the CEO of a software company. And that last 6 years, all that progression was as a result, compared to the 6 years where he'd just stayed flat before that. So here was the key. Chris sought and listened to feedback. So I think feedback is one of the things. You will not get enough feedback in your life, absolutely guaranteed. And furthermore, the feedback you do get, on average, you're probably only listening to 30% of it. So, can you listen to that? Can you go seek feedback and find it? Here's one example of how to get feedback that can be kind of neutral. I heard somebody do this who came into a new job as an executive. After about 6 months of being on the job, he went to some of his peers and he said, no one can be perfect in a job. But I'm new here and getting to learn the job and so on. If the perfect person were in this job, what do you think they'd be doing different than I am? So there's a lot of real subtlety in that question, because you're not asking the person, I'm not asking you to tell me what's wrong with me or not. You're dreaming about a perfect person, and you're going to kind of quietly give me the feedback that I need as well. So a perfect person comparison can really help in getting feedback. And of course, monitoring how you receive that feedback. But feedback is one of the best ways to be open and to hear the opportunities that are coming your way. Yes, as I said, most people are not, even out of the feedback they're getting, they're not using it. So can you be one of those? And then another Another tip to think about, especially for the women in the room. So it turns out that there is almost no relationship between confidence and competence. In other words, a person who's super confident is not necessarily competent. And a person who says, I'm not sure if I can do it or not, could be extremely competent. There's just no relationship except one. And the one relationship is the worse you are, the more competent you are. So there's an inverse relationship. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. So there's no relationship. And so a couple of things to think about in here. Just because you don't feel like you can do it doesn't mean you can't do it. And just because someone is telling you, if you're a manager, if somebody comes in and they're super confident and says, I can do this, I completely, as a manager, I completely discard that as irrelevant data. So I try not to be swayed by confidence. In one study that was done at Hewlett-Packard, they looked at men and women applying for jobs and surveyed the men after application for jobs and the women, and asked the men, what percentage of the competencies that were listed in the job description do you think you need in order to even apply for the job? And these are internal promotions. And for men in the room, what do you think that percent was? Like, roughly what percentage would you need to apply for a job inside for a promotion? Would you need 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100? 60, bingo, did you read the study? It is 60%. For women in the study, guess what their answer was? 100. So 100%. So for women, I think there's a little bit of a opportunity to stretch further than they think they can. Just because you're not confident about it doesn't mean you can't do it and that you can't learn it. If you've got a growth mindset, you'll grow into it. One of my really dear friends said she was given, her boss gave her a job to do, and she didn't think she could do it. And so she went back to her boss and said, I just think that's above my skill level now. And her boss said, maybe, but I want you to do it scared. So here's a tip. Do it scared. Are there jobs that you're doing that you're doing scared? And so what we recommend is that once a quarter, you feel like you're in over your head. If every 3 months you don't feel like, gosh, I'm not sure I can do this, it means you're stagnant. It means you're settling in. So you ought to have a little bit of fear about whether you can do a job every 3 or 4 months. Okay. And as I mentioned when we first started, the third practice, the number one way people told us they kept up to date was to hang around smart people. So how can you think about your network? Probably many of us in the room have networks that are thousands. You might have thousands of people on Facebook, or I have thousands on LinkedIn, I have thousands on Twitter. So how do you leverage, and what should you leverage in a network? What's it mean to have a great network at work? So we looked at a number of things here. So let me ask you a question. If you were going to go look for a new job today, what kind of network would you want? Would you want a weak tie network, one that is comprised of people that maybe you see once a year or you write to once a year, who formerly worked with, you went to school with them, you might have been at church with them, whatever it might be? Or would you want a strong tie network? Those people who've got your back and will make introductions for you, who care about you deeply. You spend a lot more time with them. You know, if you give them a call and say, hey, would you mind introducing me to so-and-so? You know they'll do it. So, of course, you want both. But if you had to choose just one network, how many of you would choose to have the weak tie network? And how many would choose the strong tie network? And the answer is the opposite. And let me tell you why. The strong tie network really helps you stay boosted up and builds your confidence and gives you the support that you need. But the opportunities lie in the boundaries of your weak tie networks. Your strong ties tend to know about the same jobs. and the same opportunities, and they tend to know the same people. In your strong tie network, it's likely that someone over here knows someone over here in your strong tie network. But in your loose tie network, not so much. And so the best way to find something that's at the edge of your thinking, or find a new job, or find something that's different than what you know day to day, is to also have a weak tie network. So let's get specific about what that should mean. Is it thousands? Do I have to have thousands of people that I'm grooming? Well, there's a number called Dunbar's number. And what he's looked at is, essentially how many relationships can we groom? He started with primates and how many could monkeys groom in there before they started pulling the lice out of other people's hair, out of other monkeys' hair, before they started to get stressed out. Well, that number is 150. So out of your thousands of people, are there 150 that represent different diverse industries, geographies, ways of thinking, socioeconomic backgrounds that you can keep up with once a year? That's all you have to do, is once a year. Once a year, you just send them a note to say, how are you doing? Was thinking about you the other day. It's essentially the same as what used to be when everybody would send holiday cards. But once a year, send them a note. Because if you don't send them a note this year, and 3 years from now, you think, oh gosh, that'd be the perfect person to call to get an introduction on a job, they're going to feel used. But if you've kept up with them proactively, so look around, there's more than 150 people in the room, I think. Which parts, and an enormous advantage you have is this is a university with an incredible reputation around the world and a strong alumni network. So who are the alumni, who are the alums that you're going to stay in touch with? And in places that you've been before, are there one or two that you can build up to 150? And then a second number to think about is your 5 to thrive. So are there 5 people, is there one person in your life that every time you're with them you get a new idea, or you learn something you didn't know, or they inspire you to do something differently, especially around work? And are you spending time with those people? And that may sound really obvious, but when I looked at my own calendar on it, I realized that the people that made me the best I could be in terms of thinking new thoughts were not necessarily the ones I was spending the time with. I'd maybe meet with them once a year. So now I make sure I meet with those people at least 5 times a year. And the first time I looked at my list, I realized, oh, it was all women. So I needed to diversify my list. And it doesn't mean I don't meet with the woman who's not now in the top 5. I do, but I just don't make a concentrated effort to meet with her at least 4 times a year. So just for a second, if you can think of, do I have 5 people? This is how I got a business idea that is from one of these people. This is how I stay on top of what are technology trends, because I got one person on the list who's just really good at that. Do you have 5 people? So just take a moment to just think through, do you have 5? Kind of count them in your head. Does anybody in the room have 5 right off the bat that they think could be their 5 to thrive? 4? 3? 2? 1? 0? Yeah, so that's an easy thing to go do. Get your 5 to thrive. Find your 5 to thrive. It may take you a year to, you have to broker introductions to get to people, but see if you can't get your 5 to thrive. It's different than a board of directors, because these are people that are more like your peer level. And then being greedy about experiences so that you can broaden your options for tomorrow. And we said earlier that it's all on you, and the reason you have to be greedy is because what's going to happen if you go to work at a company is you'll get a reputation for doing something, and maybe, hopefully, doing it really well. And so your boss will just keep asking you to do that same thing. over and over because he or she can count on you to get it done. And for you to break out and keep on learning and keep on grabbing new experiences, you have to stand up for yourself and ask for those. So it's a little bit self-focused or a little bit greedy about how you go acquire experiences so that you can have that experience of, feeling in over your head. So, some ideas. I was talking to, and by the way, this is, if you're a manager, there's a tip in here as well. I was talking to a woman who lived in a fairly remote area of China, and a millennial, and she was in the job 3 years. And I said, wow, but she was in an area that was a technology area, and so she could move around to other companies. I said, so why have you decided to stay? And she said, well, every time my boss gives me an assignment, she says what she expects me to learn from doing the assignment. And I don't think I'll ever have a boss like that again. I don't think I'll ever have a boss who's that planful about how am I learning, how am I growing, how am I developing. And so here's the tip. If you're a boss, what a simple retention and engagement strategy to just, when you're making assignments, tell people what you expect them to learn. And vice versa, on the other side, all you have to do is ask. So when your boss hands you an assignment and you feel like you're getting the same assignment over and over and over again, just say, is there something you want me to learn new from this assignment? And if not, I'm happy to do it, but on the next assignment, could I get something that you think is going to be stretching me a little bit to learn something a little bit new? Because I've done actually 2 startups, I know that there are a lot of corporate people who come to work in startups on the weekends and at nights. So as a volunteer, I've had people donate up to 1.5 years of time in a startup to just learn more. And I remember one of the guys that did that had worked for HP, and he took they allowed a part-time sabbatical, so he took half-time sabbatical and came to work for us, and he just learned so much about agile development and new ways of managing software that when he went back to HP because that particular startup didn't work, but within 2 years he had 2 promotions because he just brought so many new ideas in. So he was open to all these new ideas, and then he went and got the experience that he needed to go get it. And even things like getting the experiences vicariously can help. I mean, if you want to get global experience, go to the cultural festivals in your city. Try out different restaurants, just read, travel, and so on. And then one more thing to think about with the experience is your boss experience helping you or hurting you. And I'm going to argue that some of the times the way we think about what's a good boss might actually hurt us. Let's say you've got a good boss, you go to work, things are good, it's easy, he or she helps you with your work-life balance, you have a good time, he's never up on a table jumping and yelling at you with spit coming out on you, and that actually happened to me once. So, it's not that kind of experience, it's just easy. But you can wake up 10 years hence and realize life was easy, life was good, but I'm kind of stuck. I'm in the same place I've always been. Now contrast that with the boss who may not have a good boss reputation, who may be, every time you turn in a presentation, it's not quite right. You have to go redo it 3 times because this isn't right, that's not right. There's very few people, some do, but there's very few people, because I've lived and worked in the Silicon Valley for a long time, I've interviewed a lot of people who worked for Steve Jobs, and there's not very many people who liked working for him. A few did, but most didn't. But they said, I delivered the best work of my life working for him. So he pulled out the best work of their life, and you kind of get that in perspective, because it's not a comfortable, easy, fun thing to be at. So when you're thinking about who you want as a boss, my advice is find somebody who's a career developer. You look at the record of what happens after people leave working for them. And are they moving ahead or are they just escaping? And no matter and those career makers come in all kinds of styles. So don't look for a style, look for evidence of making a career. And the last practice is bouncing forward so that you can recover from the failures that you're bound to have. So here's just one person's failure. He was rejected he failed his college entrance exams 3 times, couldn't get into the police academy. Worst case scenario, they opened up a Kentucky Fried Chicken in his hometown and they accepted every applicant except for him. That one really hurt. So he started a company because he thought, well, I got to do something. And does anybody know who this is? Jack Ma, founder of Alibaba. And so this is a guy who has persistence and grit and takes failure and learns from it. I mean, if you had failed your college entrance exams 3 times, would you have gone to the 4th? Would you have done the 4th time? I'm not sure I would have. I mean, I think I would have sat and thought, well, I guess I'm not cut out for college, which is a fixed mindset. Can you have that growth mindset? If I do this enough, if I get enough practice at it, I can go do it. And there's some ways to help. I'll give just one out of this list so that we can get to questions. One way to just kind of remember is every time you fail, it's the best learning experience you could ever have because humans are wired to remember failures. So if instead of thinking, I really screwed up, that was a failure, I'll never recover from it, if instead you can sit and think, that was a failure, I really screwed up, and here's what I'm going to learn from it, so that it doesn't happen again. And it's not that you should just get back to where you were, but you should actually use it. If you've learned something, that's bouncing forward. So we say not just bounce back, but bounce forward. So one tip in here, in the motivation strategy, sometimes when you go to change yourself, other people don't let you. I was coaching a woman once who was in a defense contractor where a lot of people came there from the military. So she would show up late to meetings, and they found that disrespectful. And so she would get on her 360 feedback that she was disrespectful, she didn't show up to meetings on time, blah, blah, blah. So we said, okay, we set the alarm, moved her clock forward, do all these things. And 6 months later, I in my office again, and she says, it's not fair, I just got my 360 and people said I'm late to the meetings, and I haven't been late to a meeting in 6 months, for sure. So what we decided to do was announce her change. So now instead of just saying, and this can come in many forms, but for her, just for being on time, when she'd get to a meeting, she'd look up at the clock and she goes, oh my gosh, 3 minutes I could have done of email and stuff, but no, I'm here for you guys. So she just announced that she was changing. People will leave you in the same box until you tell them that you want to be in a different box. And so on the next 360, she was fine. So she had to announce her change to get the supporters she needed. And so I'm going to give just one tip. We spent a whole summer with a set of interns looking at all the studies we could find on what skills are needed for the future. And we decided not to look at what are the things that are going to be hired, like data mining, which is the #1 job search on LinkedIn right now. But we wanted to look at some capabilities. And we found that there is, and across all those studies, a Powerball combination of 2 capabilities. So if you only are going to work on 2 things in your life, here's the 2 things to work on. 1, get deep functional expertise in something the market wants. Now, it turns out data mining happens to be one of those things right now, but marketing, finance, whatever it is that you have, engineering, HR, whatever your field is, get really competent in that, and and branch out to the sub-disciplines of it as well. So not just one core discipline, but get deep in sub-disciplines. And the second combination is emotional intelligence. And the reason is that to get a job, to win over customers, to navigate the politics of an organization, you need emotional intelligence. To collaborate with teams, especially as you're doing so virtually, you need emotional intelligence. So get those 2 things together, even though there's lots of other skills to have that we don't have time to cover today, or 8 others that we've identified, those 2 will ensure that you stay employed. So with that, I think I'm going to wrap up. We've got cards that Don is handing out that have, on the back, you can see how to go download the first chapter free. And with that, I think I'll open it up for questions. Do I just take them, or do you moderate questions?
Well, we've got microphones, and so all you have to do is put your hand up if you have a question.
And by the way, on the back of the card is my contact information and Barbara's. You saw that we fly fish, so I'm Angler on Twitter, so it's real easy to remember. Yes?
Thank you for speaking with us today. I was wondering, with the positive effects that you mentioned about announcing goals, do you find downside with people potentially heckling you or becoming doubters to you accomplishing that goal?
Hecklers or downers on what?
On if you announce it and they're sort of heckling you of saying you know,
Yeah.
doubters that you won't be able to accomplish it, do you find downside?
Yeah. I think first off, you've got a reputation that you're coming into the door with about whether you finish things or not as well. So if you walk in the door and it's just like somebody who walks in to a gym and says, I'm gonna go win the Ironman, and you can see they're 100 pounds overweight. They don't even know what they don't know yet. So on the things that you commit to and you announce, you ought to be absolutely sure on the things that you're announcing, that you've got a plan for how you're going to do it, and you're 100% committed. So don't pre-announce before you know that you're on the path and you know what it means to get there. So the person who walks in the gym has that as a dream, but they don't really know what it's going to take to get there, that even the most elite athletes have a hard time finishing an Ironman. So a triathlon would be a half marathon would be a good goal to announce versus Ironman. But haters are going to be haters.
So you indicated that some of your research is about millennials in the workplace.
That's my last book.
And every once in a while, well, not even every once in a while, I keep on seeing all these, articles of people saying millennials are horrible, they're needy, they're destroying the workplace, all these kind of attention-grabbing headlines. And you gave us advice today about, ask your boss to learn something new on your next project. Mm-hmm. Be kind of demanding of what your opportunities are in the workplace. Create those opportunities for yourself. As a millennial entering the workplace, how do you suggest I balance the perception my coworkers might have of me and the drive to advance my career?
Mm-hmm. I've probably talked about this for about 6 years now. I was one of the first people who really was talking to a lot of people. And I've talked to thousands and probably tens of thousands of people about it. And sometimes it frightens me when I get a set of baby boomers that have no millennials in the room, and then they'll really go down a negative path. And the negative paths that they tend to go down, though, are 2 things. Either they worry about entitlement, is the phrase that they use, to say they feel entitled to. I'll give an example. A head of HR said, we had somebody come in who, within a year, felt like he had gotten all the experiences he needed to be a general manager. And I countered with, I met a woman who was 4 months out of school and got a job at a big advertising agency, and they put her in the new leadership development program where you rotated positions for a year. But she really wanted to be in social marketing, so she went to the CEO. Now, first off, she skipped levels, right? So she went to the CEO and said, I need to be in charge of social marketing, or I can't stay, because if I wait the whole year, that's like a decade in traditional marketing. Things are changing so quickly, you just have to move out. And he said, well, as soon as you get out of your program, your rotational program, then we'll do that. So that sounds like the same thing, sounds a little entitled and so on. Well, she quit and she got the job as head of social marketing for IKEA. So, within 6 months of getting out of college. So, so what's realistic and what's not? I think, to me, I told that baby boomer that story, and I said, who's to say it's not realistic to get there? So I think to counter it, as a person going in as a millennial, there's two things that you can do. Well, the other thing people worry about is that entitlement means I'm not really willing to work. So the moment you show up and you say you're all in to really help accomplish whatever needs to be accomplished at work, you're breaking the stereotype right off the bat. And then the second thing is, temper how you pursue wanting promotions and wanting to move on, but you should do it anyways. So temper it with emotional intelligence. So see where that person's coming from. They may feel like you've got to earn it like I did, and don't buy that. Listen to what they have to say, but don't buy it. The world is going to be different for you than it was for them. So, and it'll be great opportunities to practice that emotional intelligence. I should say, in all fairness, that there are many people who are so excited about what the millennials are bringing to work. So it is not that it's an all negative. There is that negative stream that goes through, but it's not all negative. Yes?
You said that there is no relationship between how you perform in school, or how well you do, and how well you do in the workplace. Why do you think companies put such an emphasis on things like GPA then?
Yeah, I think it's amazing, and because I'm in that field, we talk about it because there's not other good proxies. So it's the only proxy that we know how to use. So it's just a proxy. I'll tell you who's not doing it anymore is Google. So Google has decided that they've got enough tests and so on to give you to find out, so that it doesn't even matter if you've got a degree. So I think the leading edge companies, the forward-thinking companies, are trying to move beyond it. But for most, it's just how it's always been done kind of thing. And so it persists as a imperfect selection tool.
Thank you for your presentation. I think what you said about having a growth mindset is very relevant in today's workplace. And I want to know how has the growth mindset helped you specifically in your career?
In my career?
Yes.
Yeah, so I was working in Texas at Lockheed Martin. That's a big defense company. And I went away. I was on a board for a professional society, and one of the things they had us do was write down, where do you think you're taking real risks in your life? And if you're not, what are you going to do about it? And I always thought of myself as a risk taker, and I realized I had settled into a comfortable lifestyle. I was well known in the community, and I'll dare say liked at work. I was running the training department. I had a little bit of a national reputation in training, but I didn't have much of a global presence. And I wasn't sure. I'd hardly traveled even. I don't even think I had a passport at the time. And so compare that to, I travel about 200 to 250,000 miles a year now. So I got an opportunity to promote at that company and move to Washington, D.C. And I decided, even though I'm not very global, it's out of my reach. I want to learn that. So I went to work for, I got headhunted, and I went to work for Heinz, the people that make ketchup and sauces, and they're a very global company. And decided that I would, at 42 years old, learn how to become a global citizen by getting a job that required me to be very, very global. And it would have been much more comfortable to stay where I was. Yes.
What's the best piece of feedback you've ever gotten and the best piece of feedback you've ever given, and why?
Okay. Well, the best piece of feedback I ever got, there's two. I'm going to it'll be hard to choose between the two. So that Chris James up there, one of the that I had told you about, or up here for you. One time he gave me feedback. He was very, very good at getting things done, and I'm very good at having lots of ideas. And he said to me, you know, Karie, not every good idea has to be acted upon. And I thought that was just brilliant advice. I mean, it just makes people crazy if they feel like they've got to act on every good idea you've got. Some, you have to sort through the good ideas and let some of them go away. And regarding a career, back at Lockheed Martin, I was up for the position of director for the first time. And there were 3 people that were in contention for the job, and I said to my mentor, who eventually became president of the company, if I don't get the job, then I'm going to have to move. I'll have to go to another company. And he said, you're completely thinking about this the wrong way. You should be looking for what problems need solving here, and can you go help fix that problem? And jobs get made up all the time if there's a problem that's big enough to go solve and you've got a realistic way to go solve it. So I thought, well, that's amazing. And I thought that we needed to do some work on cultural change. So I proposed that idea and got the job so I got both at the same time. And actually that work I did on the cultural change is, got documented in a number of textbooks and in Harvard Business Review as a case study and so on. So it really launched my career, but I was thinking about a job. I had a small mindset going after a job, and I just needed to open up my ideas to a much bigger. And, maybe the best feedback I've ever given. I probably used Chris as the example because, I would just sit with him in presentations, and we had an agreement that I would just tap his toe every time he was raising an objection that made people feel like what I'm presenting isn't being listened to because you're objecting too early. And so just this constant, over a period of 3 or 4 months until it really clicked in for him. And he went from someone people didn't really want to work for to the person everybody wanted to work for because they knew because he loosened up and decided to be himself at work, not have this work presence and this, home persona. He integrated those as well, so that everybody wanted to work for him. He was so fun. He wanted to do a flaming pudding for the holidays at my house, and so he came and but he poured too much booze on it, and whoosh, up to, and I had some little fringe, so then, there was a whoosh fire of the little things on there, and everybody thought he'd done it on purpose because he became that fun of a guy. So.
Thank you for the presentation. So I have one question. You mentioned that one of the core capabilities is to develop your emotional intelligence. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Like, what are some useful ways you found it's helpful in terms of that?
Mm-hmm. So one of my professors at Case Western Reserve was Richard Boyatzis, who's written on emotional intelligence with Daniel Goleman and so on. Richard Boyatzis runs a MOOC that gets nearly 1 million participants in each of its sessions. He's a really good teacher on emotional intelligence, and I think that's free or almost free kind of thing. But I think any of the books by Daniel Goleman are a good starting point on emotional intelligence. As a good place to learn. And I think it really helps to get, I tend to like to find people who I think are good at something and just hang around them. So do you have a friend who you admire and you can begin to be in situations with them where you study, how is it that they're so good at persuading people to their opinion? Or how is it that they're so good in navigating a social situation? So. Yeah. One more, all right.
Hi, thanks again for being here. My question is about travel, and you mentioned that in being a global citizen. I think there are a lot of growth opportunities when we travel and a lot of skills that are relevant in the professional field. But the time and investment that goes into travel takes away from time that I could be doing an internship or taking a course or anything like that. So what is your advice in that regard?
Yeah, diversify your experiences. So if you've spent a lot of time taking courses, then take some time to travel. If you've done a lot of travel but you don't have the credentials, so look at the whole portfolio of your experiences. And even if you're in the midst of taking a course, can you look at what might, is there a Greek festival in town that you can go to? Is there, can you pull up some books to really, for example, I've traveled to India maybe 15 or 20 times, but I read a book called The God of Small Things, and it just really helped me think about what I perceived as the caste system in a really different way. Just so sometimes great literature can help you expand your thinking and shift you out of a mindset of where you might be to be able to appreciate different cultures.
Karie Willyerd, on behalf of the students and faculty and those of knowledge business, a few packable gifts.
Okay.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for being here.